Here's to the women who won't settle, the badasses, the rebels, the ones who know they deserve more, those who know how to get their worth, those who refuse to settle for mediocre careers. You can hate them or you can love them, but the one thing you can't do is ignore them. Why? Because you admire them. Welcome to Her Career Talk. I'm your host, Olivia Jaras. Here you'll find the tools, inspiration, and advice to help you take back and stay in control of your career. You see, as a woman, you already have some incredible tools and skills that can be used to your advantage in the workplace. We're here to show you how to use those tools. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, ladies, I am so beyond thrilled with our guest today, Phil M. Jones, joining us all the way from London, because he is literally one of those authors that I have on repeat on my Audible account. I have copies of his books, and honestly, they're all stained with coffee and broken pages. He's that kind of author, let alone that he is a serial entrepreneur. You started your first business when you were 14. By the time you were 15, you were earning more than your high school or your school teachers. And you are crushing it in the international scene. He's renowned as one of the world's top advertising experts and wordsmithing experts, I would really say, because you literally know exactly what to say, when to say it, and you teach this across all different platforms. But more importantly, ladies, he's here to talk to us about what exactly you should be saying and when should you be saying it, because so many of us underestimate the power of what comes out of our mouths any given time. Phil, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of what it is that you're doing here. I think it's great work. Thank you.
Well, listen, now I know that now you're like the CEO of many companies. You are a serial entrepreneur. You're flown all over the world under normal circumstances. Right now, I think you're virtually flying all over the world to speak and teach in events, but it wasn't always this way. Right? Can you give us a little bit of the background story of like how Phil came to be the expert that you are nowadays? And ladies, I think you're really going to like this story.
Yeah, sure. I guess how far back do we go is I've had a desire to want to outperform my environment my whole entire life. So I was fortunate enough to be born to two beautiful, loving, hardworking parents, but no silver spoon, leg up chance to be able to go and achieve more for my life. And at the age of 14, I remember very specifically that I wanted to achieve something more. I was in a pretty decent school, and I didn't have the trappings of what the other kids had at my school, like whether it was sneakers, whether it was the bag I was carrying, the coat I was wearing, etc. And I did all the normal things that like a kid at 13, 14 would do. And I asked my parents for the money to be able to buy those things for me. And I got a variety of different versions of no. And I decided to take success into my own hands, and at the age of 14 started knocking on the doors of my neighbors and just asking them quite politely whether they'd be interested in having their cars washed. And some said yes and some said no. Most just asked me how much money I would charge. Really? Yeah, which really very quickly was like, wow, this is cool. And I built a little car cleaning business that so much so by the age of 15 I didn't go to school as often as I should. And I remember getting invited in by my teachers, questioning my attendance, saying, Phil, why didn't you come to class? And I'd respond with a question. The question I'd always respond with was, well, how much money are you making, sir? And
my gosh, really?
Really. And school teachers refused to tell me at the time. But my little car cleaning business was delivering me around £2,500 a month, so about $4,000 at the time. And the reason I didn't go to class is I had sort of customers that needed servicing and staff that needed direction. And I viewed my traditional education as something that I'd fit part-time around my businesses. So I built a number of other businesses through my teens. I still got decent grades through all my exams. Wow. I still honored my education, but I went to learn, not to attend. So that was a fun little part in the journey kicking me off. Age of 18, I had a dilemma of, really, offer on the table, super prestigious university in the UK, but I didn't want to go and follow that traditional path of getting a university degree and following that.
So what did you do?
Well, I remember speaking to my parents and saying, how would you feel if I went and try to get a big job, the kind of big job you could only get with a big degree? And they said that couldn't be done. And 3 weeks later, I proved them wrong and became the youngest ever sales manager for a business called Debenhams Department Stores. So like a big department store retail chain. And I joined their grad program with all of the other graduates as a management trainee.
Even though you didn't have an undergraduate degree.
Correct.
Wow.
And I knew that I wanted to learn the ropes on the job. I've been a big believer in the greatest way you get experience is you earn it. Like, you don't need a piece of paper to tell you that you're capable of it. You need experience and experience.
All right, can I pause you right there? Because I have an urgent question to this.
Go ahead.
So you never ended up going to college?
I have no college degree. I do.
Oh my gosh, ladies, are you guys listening to this? This is so empowering. Because so many women in particular, and I know men do this too, but you know that we're talking to the ladies here. So many women in particular feel that they have to go back to school, get more credentials, instead of just jumping in and learning on the job.
So a part of my career chapter is I was head of retail commercial director for a Premier League soccer club. And I remember some of the people were pushing back about a player at the time, about saying he's not worth that money. He's only 17 years of age. There's no way you can pay someone that money. And I remember thinking, well, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And if you're good enough, you're worth it. And there's so much prejudice that exists, whether it's age prejudice, whether it's sex prejudice, whether it's a discrimination towards race, etc., that we build these force fields around us to say we need these coats of armor in whether it's credentials or experience or a past because somebody else is carrying us over the threshold, that we forget that one of the greatest things that we have is our belief in ourselves and then the reputation we create for ourselves once we lean into that experience. And a friend of mine called Hal Elrod, who wrote The Miracle Morning, I caught on his Instagram today on the date that we're recording this. And I love this little poetic piece where he says that, I don't know whether it was his quote or he just shared it, a bird that sat on a branch never worries about the branch breaking because it believes in its ability to fly.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I loved it too, which is why I reshared it. And I thought there's so much empowerment in that statement alone that is like people are looking for permission from somebody else to say they need to be successful, whatever that version is. And whether that's a piece of paper, whether it's, your boss telling you you're good enough. And I think this is a thing that happens to so many people in the workplace is they wait for permission to be successful. And because nobody gives them permission, then they blame. And quite often it doesn't need that blame. It's that they actually would have opened the door for you if you asked them or you knocked loud enough. It's just that you thought it's their job to open it when you could have just knocked and asked, can I come through?
Well, and beyond that, there's some times where we think that they're going to say no, but they never even thought about it. And they may or may not. They're not thinking about you.
Right. And not even because they're mean or malicious. Just because we're all trying to figure out a load of our own stuff that quite often other people's career, it's not in my top whatever list. It just doesn't exist. Right. As a leader of people really thinking about somebody achieving their career aspirations is highly unlikely to be top of the pile. And it should be, right? As leaders, we should do a better job at that. But my experience of working with over 800 industries, I found that almost nobody does. Yet people
everybody's thinking about themselves.
Well, what do I need to do today? What do I need to do now? What should I have done yesterday?
Right.
Not who could do more.
So how did you take those experiences, go from a no college grad into proving your parents wrong, which must have felt kind of awesome, not only for you, but your parents must have felt really proud of you.
Well, there's a long gap between the moment of them suggesting it wasn't a great idea and feeling proud, and that long gap might be as many as like 16 or 17 years. Because
but let's time lapse.
We like that to be like a cookie cutter of an approach, right? Is I went from youngest ever sales manager at Debenhams, my mentor then going off long-term sick, me having to take a more senior position as a kind of temporary measure that was, again, another baptism of fire. I then, in my role there, realized the only way that I could step up in that ladder is, like when you hit one of those glass ceilings, is the only way that I could get the next promotion in that role was if the person above me like left or died. And he was in great shape. So realizing he was in great shape, it was I should probably look for a change. And I went from there and was headhunted to head up the sales operation of a big furniture retail business in the UK. And this was interesting because I was in my early 20s at the time, and they didn't recruit sales staff under the age of 25.
Oh.
So almost everybody in the organization was older than me. And I was in the responsible position of leading some of these teams, which was a peculiar set of circumstances, and it taught me a powerful lesson about respect.
You have to earn it.
And you're not entitled to it in any way. And I use the word entitled on purpose because quite often we think a title delivers us the expectation of respect. Mm-hmm. And that was probably where I got some of my biggest grounding for the work that I now understand about word choices. Is because the greatest way that I could influence other people is that I wouldn't share with them what I thought they should do, is I share with them what other people were doing that would allow them to get better results than them. So I would create proxy mentors out of success stories within the team, and I would be the facilitator for those success stories in others, which meant I had to collect them, which meant I witnessed other, thousands of other people being brilliant. And I did great through that organization, heavy retail organization, 80 hours a week, working every Saturday, Sunday, public holiday. It became life, the only people I would see that would care about my team and my customers. So that took me to...
Ask a quick question. So you were gaining the respect of the older sales force or sales team by not saying, hey, this is what you need to do, but hey, have you heard about what so-and-so is doing? This is a fabulous approach that I just found out. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about. Wait, and how would you ask? I'm guessing you haven't heard, or one of these, I'm sorry, I'm trying to sift through the book because I know there's some really good ones on these, where you ask them basically hey, have you heard about this? Right? Well, how would you approach that conversation to gain the respect?
Well, what I would do if I was looking to be able to influence the success of somebody else, using the success of somebody else to be able to then help share that story, I might use a preface in words, which is, what do you know about, or what do you understand about? So if I was looking to speak to somebody about how they could be more influential in the world of podcasting right now, I might say, well, what do you understand about what Olivia is up to and how she's creating some great content that is serving a particular group of people? What do you understand about that? Okay. To which they might say, well, not a lot. I say, well, would it help if I walked you through some of the things that she's doing right now and how you might be able to learn from her success story? They say that would be great.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. That is the perfect stepping into the actual practice of the theory. So thank you for that.
There you go. But yeah, my career story is long and compounded in terms of the steps that run through it, which is why I was trying to get it the quick way around. So I did the DFS thing. I then did professional sport, helped secure one of the largest shirt sponsorship deals the club had ever had. Had a brilliant and both challenging boss. One of the most successful female CEOs in the UK, a lady called Karen Brady, was my boss for some time. And I learned a huge amount from her. I went from there to work with a Russian billionaire at Leicester City Football Club and achieved some results there with those guys before starting a property business with a business partner of mine that turned over £240 million at its peak. And that takes us through to about 2008. And 2008, life got a bit tricky. I didn't know what the future would hold. Our property business was great on a Monday. We had a product we couldn't sell by the Friday, through everything moving against it. So we brought that business down, and I kept being invited in by chambers of commerce and small business networking groups, and then organizations to say, hey, Phil, can you come speak to our people about how they might be able to to rebuild something out of the ashes, how they can win business in times of change, what they can do to be able to take success in their own hands when they're in these recessionary times in 2008. So I thought at some point in my future, I had aspirations of speaking and writing and doing these kind of things, but I thought I'd need to be gray before I can get there. But I got invited into these environments while I was figuring out what business I'd want to build next. And here we are, like 12, nearly 13 years on, and I'm still doing much of the same. And I've written 9 best-selling books and spoken 57 countries, trained over 2 million people, all through the fact that I'm remarkably curious, and then I love to serve. That's the gig. And I think more people can be more curious about what, how, and where can be done. And I think we live in a world right now where everybody wants a hero to look up to. And when they have a hero to look up to, what they do is they look up to them and say, wow. And what I'd much rather more people would do is they look up to them and say, how. And I think how is a more powerful question than the exclamation of wow. And then there's so much to learn. Like, is lots of people look at other people's success story and they're like, that's not fair. But if you're to compare the whole of you, the whole of them, then you probably wouldn't have tread the journey either. Yet what there's a huge amount of clues in anybody else's success story that can give you a fair advantage if you're prepared to be curious enough to dig for them, as opposed to try and just look at what's on the surface.
Now, you bring in something really important that I think is something that as humans we need to learn how to cultivate, because it doesn't seem, at least nowadays, to come naturally, which is curiosity. You know how we're all wrapped up in our own story and what we want to accomplish, even though we don't realize this. Like getting out of your own head to figure out ways how you can serve others, like help yourself by serving others, by using your words, actions, and such to influence behavior. How do you begin to becoming a curious person? Because I see so many people who just don't care. They just want what they want, but they don't take the time to cultivate curiosity.
It's a good question, and probably a lifelong puzzle that then none of us will solve. Yet there are some factors that go into this. Is if your goal is to achieve certainty in a conversation, which is what often people want, right? They want to show up and they want somebody to understand their point of view. They want somebody to change their way of thinking towards the same way of thinking as them. Like they want to be able to win an argument, achieve an outcome, get a result, whatever it is. They're looking for certainty. When they're looking for certainty, they show up with certainty, which is a version of I know. Like, I know I'm right for this role. I know I can do this job. I know that I'm the number one pick. I know. And when you create I know, what you actually do is you create friction in the other person, and you've resulted in uncertainty because you showed up with certainty. The absolute reverse of which is true. If you show up with curiosity, with the voice in your head saying, I might not know, like I think I know, but I might not know, then curiosity leads to certainty. And that's a superpower that requires a conscious switch in your head to go, I need to engage that tool first. And what it looks like is that I might not know. Let's take it into the viewpoint of I'm approaching a conversation that you're looking for a promotion in your work. Let's take a set of words from the front of the book, and exactly what to say is one of the biggest reasons that people don't ask for the things that they want in life is because they're fearful of rejection. I know that would be true. So what happens if I create a sequence of words that allows just about anybody to ask for just about anything, with the result being completely rejection-free? And it means that you can preface an ask in one of two ways. Way number one is that I'd use the preface, I'm not sure if it's for you. Now, if I use the words, I'm not sure if it's for you, then what happens in the other person's little voice is two things. One is, well, I'll be the judge of that. They take full personal responsibility for the fact that they need to make a decision, so it plays towards their ego. The second thing that happens is curiosity is piqued. They want to know what it is. So say, for example, I wanted to approach somebody about a promotion. I might say, look, I'm not sure if it's for you, but I might be able to actually do a little bit more for you, take some work off your plate and help us achieve more of what the goals are we're looking for as a team.
Oh, that's a really good way.
Yeah. It frames a conversation to say, well, what do you mean by that? And now all of a sudden you just created a job interview without being invited for one.
That's awesome. Now, I will say though, and this is one of those things that for me, and again, ladies, I mean, you guys can't actually see through it if you're watching this in podcast, but Phil's book, Exactly What to Say, is something you need to go ahead and order immediately because it's phenomenal. It's laid out perfectly in short bite sizes in which you can literally digest these phrases and internalize them very, very quickly. Now, one of the things that you're hitting on right now is something that's such a big problem when it comes down to women, is that you've got two kinds of, I guess, women, or at least stereotypes in the workforce. Those who come across as overly assertive because they ask in the I want, I know way. And then intrinsically, socially, we are predisposed to internalize that as bossy, as pushy, and just it antagonizes people at one level or another. But then there's the other side where women, kind of like what you're saying, they just actually they don't ask because they feel with all certainty that they will be rejected. And overcoming that sense of rejection, like positioning the conversation in this way that you're explaining to us, is fantastic because that gives you the solution. But there's a tiny little bit right before you actually change that conversation or take it in that direction where it's not really about asking for anything. How do you make that decision to have that vote of confidence in yourself?
Yeah, big question. And full disclosure, I'm not a woman, right? So I cannot see it with the truest of empathy. I have had...
You have 4 daughters.
I have 4 daughters. I have worked with dozens, perhaps hundreds, perhaps even thousands of brilliant women. And I'd like to live in a world where we're not necessarily, drawing lines between it that way, right? It's just like, who's the right person for the job? I think, how do you get your mindset right towards this in terms of giving yourself the position to ask is firstly remembering you don't need to, you've got permission to ask more than once. And I think that's a big, you've got permission to ask more than once. And that's
Can you elaborate on it?
It's a fairly big reframe. People think that there's this one crystallized moment that is like, I need to get this asked right because all of my bets are hedging on this one opportunity and it's either going to happen here or it's not going to happen. And if you think about the world of dating, there is like there's dozens of little moments that exist that it's, from making eyes to inviting somebody to this, to hanging out more, etc. Like the shall we get married question isn't like from a distance, it's from up close, because what you did is you created enough close encounters to get yourself into that conversation of saying, shall we ask that question? And your goal isn't to be able to ask the big questions. Your goal is to create the moment in which that question can be asked. That's the second reframe, is to create the moments in which those questions could be asked.
I love that idea.
Powerful content. You have powerful ideas. You have powerful visions that you want to be able to get across to people, yet without permission, you're pushy. So if you try and push your idea onto somebody without permission, it's going to create friction. It's going to create resistance. If you gain permission for the exploration of your ideas, now you've got listening. So let's have a look at some other ways we can ask for permission. And another rejection-free opening formula is to lean on the fact that almost everybody in the world sees themselves as open-minded. Like if I took a room full of 1,000 people and said, who in this room sees themselves as open-minded? 900 hands shoot up. The other 100 wouldn't raise their hand even if I offered cake, right? Like they're not raising their hands. So everybody wants to see themselves as open-minded. Use that fact with your phraseology. You'll get a window more easily by turning that fact into a question. Because a question is fueled with curiosity and it gets you towards the outcome you're looking for. The question would be, how open-minded would you be to? Hey, how open-minded would you be sitting down for 10 minutes and exploring some ways that maybe I could take on more responsibility here? How open-minded would you be to learning about how some of my past experience could be really valuable to your organization in times like now? How open-minded would you be to understanding some more about a project that I fulfilled in a past role that I think would be really valuable to the way that you're currently doing things in your organization?
So can I give you a specific case scenario in which I would love to figure out how to apply this for some of the ladies who could use it, but they're struggling. Like, for example, if they're on LinkedIn, they're trying to search for opportunities and connect with the CEO of a company. I often tell them, like, listen, ditch applying to online jobs. Online applicant tracking portals are just repositories of resumes. Yep. Your resume more than likely will not get read. So you have to reach outside of the network to find that dream opportunity. But oftentimes we find people getting ghosted, as in, like, they'll send out a message, but they get ghosted. Like, and you can see that people read it, right? Whether it's a text message or whether it's a LinkedIn message. What do you do in those situations? How do you use your words to get people in?
Okay.
Sorry. This is just too riveting.
And I have some strong opinions on it, so we're going to go with it. You've got to throw out this idea that you got ghosted. Like you didn't get ghosted. Somebody just decided that they had something to deal with that was more important than you, right? Back in the days before we had cell phones and we knew that people read stuff, like, we were pretty aware that the whole world didn't revolve around us. Like, mail came through calls that we ignored, that we put straight in the trash. Like, nobody's sending a direct mail from the Clean Easy catalog or whatever it might be is saying, oh, they ghosted me because they didn't ring me to place an order. Like, this stuff happens everywhere. And is sometimes it's not shoot the messenger or shoot the recipient. It's actually look at the message. The message might have been the problem. And often the outreach for message, and this isn't just in job hunting, it's in sales outreach, it's on, like, in LinkedIn, I probably get 200 people a day pitching me for something terrible.
Yeah.
So how am I going to see through that noise? I just decide that unless there is something in this that makes it worthy of my time, then I'm going to ignore it. And quite often your ask is self-centered, not serving. Mm-hmm. And if your ask comes across as self-centered, then I'll deal with this when I've dealt with all of my stuff, which is not now, maybe never.
Right.
So the outreach needs to trigger things. Okay, if you're looking at a male employer, understand one thing that you've learned to be true about most men. What is one thing that you know to be true about most men in positions of authority? What do they have a rather large?
Ego. There
you go. Glad you got the question right.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, we kept it clean. So what we've got they have a large ego. How do you play to the fact that people have a large ego? You ask for the one thing that everybody with a large ego loves to give: their opinion.
Yes. Okay. I follow.
Let's be real on this for a second, right? Is if you reached out to me and said, hey, Phil, I'd love to pick your brain for 60 minutes just for us to be able to talk about the impact of your book and the words that people could use in the world of recruiting, I'd be like, I'll get around to that one day. You say, hey, I run an amazing show. I'd love to be able to host you and introduce you to my audience. I'm like, heck yeah, get me in. You want my opinion for that? The message
I think that's sort of how I reached out to your PR people, by the way. We're here.
I know, I see the message. I see the message. And that's what we should be brave enough to critique, is to say, hold on, the other person's doing nothing wrong in not replying to us.
Yeah.
We are doing something wrong.
Don't take it personally. We're not a victim. Yeah, I love this.
We're not a victim unless we are making ourselves that victim, which I think happens to people a lot, male and female across the board. It's like, woe's me. And if I can find a reason that somebody else didn't pick me, somebody else didn't do the thing that I wanted to do, where it isn't my fault, happy days. They didn't reply to me because I'm a woman. They didn't reply to me because I'm too young. They didn't reply to me because I'm white, I'm black, I'm too short, I'm too like if I can pass the blame onto somebody else and it wasn't my fault, happy days. Whereas what we should be looking at is to say, if we're serious about this, is there something I could do differently that's going to drive a different result? And often the answer to that is
what do you do?
Well,
what do you do?
Well, okay. There's a button that you're looking to be able to hit in every communication. And that button is the show me that you know me button.
Okay.
And that's what is missing from almost every conversation is empathy. So say, for example, that there's somebody you want to reach out to on LinkedIn. If your communication feels like the fact that you sent this same message to more than 2 other people No, I say more than 2 other people, not like it was copy and pasted to hundreds, sent to more than 2 other people, then you know nothing about me. Therefore, I have no desire to know anything about you.
Yeah, that is so true.
So do the work. There's a beautiful thing that you can do when it comes to jobs is you can choose who you work for. And I think so many people think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to just like throw my resume out to hundreds of people and see who picks me. Could you imagine doing that from a dating point of view?
Exactly. Preach it.
Get to be able to choose, and I like be brave enough to get after the job that you want by prospecting properly. And there's a technique that I teach to people, and we talk about this in exactly how to sell, and I've never really applied it to job search before, but it works in the same way, is most people are chasing too many opportunities. And the same is true.
My goodness.
And when it comes to being able to build a solid pipeline from a sales point of view, I teach people to become devilishly productive. From training more than 2 million sales professionals, there's a sweet spot number to number of opportunities you can realistically prospect without losing like a level of personalization, without getting to a point where all of a sudden you're spammy. And that magic number is 18. 18 prospects is the maximum number of people that I felt comfortable that you can service. And I say the maximum. If somebody was to be devilishly productive, I'd move that. No, at any one period of time. Is 18 total. I'd build that list into 3 groups of 6. This is why I call it devilishly productive. Is there's 6 in one camp, 6 in the next, and 6 in the other. That's 666. Yeah. And what I'd have is I'd have 6 low-hanging fruit. I'd have 6 of my core business, and then I'd have 6 dream clients. You could do the exact same thing if you're looking at a new career.
Right.
So like big fish.
Easy jobs to get.
Yeah, like what is down at the low end? Well, let me work 6 right now that could probably get me in a job by Friday if I'm short of cash, if I'm looking to be able to bring some money in to get me through to Christmas, if I can show up and buy me some time, make sure I can take care of my family. 6 down there I'm working. 6 is the core sweet spot that I'm looking for right now. It's like what I used to do, but it's one level up. It's like the thing that I'm really aiming at. And hold on, why not dream big? There must be 6 opportunities that if today was my birthday and I landed the dream ticket, then what would that look like? And all I'd be looking at is to saying, how are you romancing your conversations towards each of those 6 opportunities that are getting you closer towards a decision? What is your play? What is it you're doing? And most people want to get from A to Z. They just want to jump straight to the finish line. I want to put one piece of communication out that's going to result in a phone call, that's going to result in an interview, that's going to result in an offer. Doesn't always work.
Exactly.
Like if I was serious about landing a big job right now, and let's say if I wanted to work with any organization in the world, I'd look to interview their decision makers on something that I wanted to get their opinion on. That'll get me a foot in the door.
All right. So a hypothetical case scenario. Let's say like 30 days you want to land a job at, let's say like Google or something, or something that would be relevant to you.
Just ask me what would I do if we were looking to be able to get it done well. So what would I do? Looking to land a job at Google is firstly understand companies don't make decisions, people do.
Okay. Who would you reach out to?
At Google, you get a job in somebody's team. Who's the somebody?
The head of the team.
The head of what?
Let's call her Susan. Let's call Susan the director of the department.
And she's the director of what, sorry?
Of the department of exactly what to say within Google. and then there's Jimmy, Joey, and Jesse that report to her.
Okay. And do you want to report directly to Susan or Jimmy, Joey, or Jesse?
I don't know. You tell me. I mean, you want to dream big. Let's dream big. Okay. You want to report to Susan.
I want to report.
But I'm just giving you peer names of who would be your peers.
Okay.
Right. In case that serves you.
So if I wanted to work at Google, working for Susan alongside Jimmy, Joey, and Jesse, or whoever it was, there'd be a few things I would do. Firstly, I'd connect on LinkedIn with Jimmy, Joey, and Jesse.
Yep.
And what I would do in my connection request is I'm looking forward to a conversation with Susan.
Even though you don't have it set up yet, or?
I am looking forward to a conversation with Susan. It's 100% true. right?
Yes, I love this.
looking
Okay.
forward to a conversation with Susan. There is no lies in that. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about your experience of working with Google. Anything you'd care to share?
Perfect. Okay.
Now I got some
I'm
research.
following you.
What would I now do with Susan? I wouldn't necessarily reach out on LinkedIn. I'd look to be able to find out some stuff about Susan. Chances are that there's some things that I can go looking for. Chances are that she's read something, she's written something, she's created something, she's showed up at something. There's something online. If you want to capture somebody's attention from a prospecting point of view right now, there are a few tools you've got. One is that you can deliver some form of sincere praise. Like something that you've seen that somebody's done that you can show up in your communication and say, I saw that, I thought it was brilliant, you're awesome. If it's not praise, it's gratitude. Why can you not? What could you do to show up with some gratitude? Is if I'm in your shoes right now, what would my outreach to Susan be if I'm inspired by her female leadership and I want to work under her reign in order to be able to do some more great work? Is I might reach out to Susan and say something along the lines of, one of the things that I've been looking for as I progress in my career is brilliant female role models that I can look up to.
Yes, I love that. Oh my goodness.
And through my research, I've stumbled across your work. I've been following some of the things that you do. And I just want to say thank you for some of the great contributions that you've made for people like myself to be able to follow in your footsteps.
That is sheer genius. That is absolute genius. You have got her attention.
Right. Got her attention. And then my ask wouldn't be, can I, or, instead I'm going to throw down a challenge. I would love the opportunity to be able to work with you at some point in time. What would it take for you to consider creating an opportunity for someone like me? What would it take? Some form of throw down a challenge. Now, all of a sudden, that requires a response.
So you throw all of that, the gratitude and throwing down a challenge, in the same conversation, or you do it after she responds, right?
In the same conversation, but that conversation could be 17 emails. It's the same conversation.
Okay.
Right?
And in the meantime, Jimmy, Joey, and Jesse, what are they doing? What are you doing with them?
Well, I'll see what happens when they came back.
Okay.
And I've worked this with Susan through Jimmy, Joey, and Jesse, but bear in mind that Susan is one of my dream jobs on my 666.
And you're repeating the same for all the 6.
Yeah.
Top priority, big fish, middle fish, tiny fish.
Yeah, but like the low end ones that are in there is I might be sending out application forms. Just hedging my bet. So I might be sending a text message to an old buddy and saying like, hey, if there's anything I can do to be able to help with this, is that I'm working existing network, knowing that I'm just, I'm giving myself a safety blanket.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I love this. This is such an amazing way to approach this. I love your 666 approach. That's brilliant.
Well, also,
but let me bring it right back.
It gamifies.
Sorry, go ahead.
It gamifies the process in the fact that I'm just working through opportunities. I'm rolling the dice. I'm having fun. I'm seeing what I can do. I'm looking to in effect professionally flirt with the opportunities that could exist.
Right, and you're not taking it personally, right? Like you just said, when you gamify things, you remove the sting of like, oh my gosh, it's me. They're not going to like me. They're going to reject me. But rather it makes it about a game. I can't wait to go share that with our community. Huh?
There is no big ask, which means that a no only means a no, not today. It's only a timing issue. It means that, like, let's play this out. And that conversation goes well with Susan. And I say, what would it take? And she comes back and says, I admire the fact that you're reaching out this way around. Our team is really at max capacity right now. And if I'm going on what my boss is telling me, it's possible I'm going to be asked to reduce my team as we come into Q1 next year. So I don't see that I have any vacancies. To which I might then respond to Susan and say, thank you so much for your transparency. Answer me this. Who are the people within your organization that share the same values as we do? Now I'm going to consciously use the word we, that might be interesting for me to follow should the right opportunity come up within Google. Who might be the right people to follow? And now all of a sudden I get 2, 3, 4 names. I say, well, would it be okay if, or well, I might actually put an asking first. Would you mind doing me a small favor? She says, yeah, sure. What is it? I say, would you mind maybe just paving the way to open up a simple introduction to those people for me, either by the form of email or a LinkedIn connection? Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to do that for you.
Brilliant. And then you start the same conversation over with those other opportunity holders.
And it's a career that we're looking for, right? That's what we're looking to be able to help people do is a lifelong career. And everybody wants to like get to the finish line. I'm like, there's no finish line. It's just permanent reinvention, right? For as long as we choose to go.
Right. Right. And that's what we forget sometimes, is that it's not about the finish line. It's the entire process to get you there.
And that reinvention doesn't always have to be upwards. It can be sideways, it can be downwards, it can be whatever you want it to be on your terms, providing you're prepared to be able to choose it and then take the steps to be able to get towards it.
That's awesome. This is so powerful. I'm so glad. And I think, honestly, within those 30 days, you landed that job with Susan.
Or you'd know that you're never going to get a job with Susan.
Good point. But you are already talking to her.
Yeah. But you're growing your resilience, you're learning, you're putting yourself into a situation where you understand that might not be worth chasing. You might even decide you don't want it. Like, think about that for a second. I know loads of people that have said, I'd love to work for so-and-so, and then 3 years later, they're like, never work for those people.
Not worth it. Yeah.
Right. And some people's dream of what a certain role is very different to the reality that then happens when you get up close. But sometimes this dance will allow you to get close enough to say, do I want this more, or was I right to stay away? And that exploration is worthy of doing. That's work worth investing in.
I think that what you're saying is so powerful because often when in the job search in particular, women feel undervalued and underappreciated, not necessarily because of the interactions that they've had with the workforce, but because of that nagging little voice that we have inside that's always bringing us down, which seems to be a little bit louder in women than it is in men. So that thought of kind of thinking, maybe I am worth exploring what I want and I'm not wanting, is something really powerful.
It also could be possible that little voice isn't necessarily louder in women than it is in men. It could just be women are smarter enough to be able to understand it better. And
is that a good thing?
I think it can be. Is what many guys do is that they overcome that with bravado and bullishness, and then they lead through a way that lacks compassion. And we can see that. Now, they present it as a strength, but if you have true empathy, you'll understand more often than not that was a weakness. I don't know anybody that doesn't have some version of imposter syndrome, regardless of how successful they're at. I've delivered over 3,000 professional presentations, and still every time I get picked to go on stage to speak to an audience, I'm like, why did they pick me? They could have picked loads of people. Why did they pick me? Like, am I the right person for this? Am I going to do this? Am I going to forget my words? Am I going to mess up today? Like, all that stuff still happens, even with the quantity of reps that I have in my world at this time. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay for us to question ourselves and have self-doubt. Like, that's what means you show up and you care and you bring a version of yourself to the thing that you're doing that does continually innovate and does continually get better. Because there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And I think a lot of people get the wrong side of that line. And that's what many women are fearful of doing.
Right. Coming across as arrogant makes us never cross that line in the first place. Right. Like getting to that stage is kind of like the second step is how do I put myself out there to actually get onto that stage to deliver that keynote? I think is the starting point where it's like, okay, how do you overcome that?
And that's a bravery.
I'm sorry, we've gone through so many different tangents, but this is such a powerful conversation.
I know. It's a bravery thing. And I can't promise to, or I can't even confess to say how. I'm very fortunate in that the rapid growth of my career happened when I was young enough to know that I wasn't entitled to be able to achieve that success. Like I had hope.
I think that's why it resonates with our ladies. I think that's what's going to be very powerful whenever the women are listening to this, is because that sense of like, I'm not top dog is kind of how women feel most of the time. Because if they are acting out as like, I feel like top dog, they also realize that they're embodying a very male or masculine figure. So that sense of, in many ways, what you went through early on in your career is kind of how women feel most of the time. And how do you overcome that feeling of, hey, I'm like in my early 20s.
There's a reframe in this that I found remarkably useful. And I was gifted it by, in completely different contexts, by a beautiful couple friend of mine, Tom and Tamsin Webster. Tamsin Webster is somebody you should look up. Fantastic female. Does some brilliant work around the red thread, helping people find their value proposition, helping companies navigate their brand and stuff. Cool. And we were sat having drinks in Boston, and this whole concept came up of about like what winning looks like. And Tom came up with a phrase that very rarely gets used. And it was the phrase that it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. And I loved it. Just think on that for a second, right? The second mouse gets the cheese. And that spoke so much of my life. And I think it could speak to and empower people when you feel like you're coming into this as the second favorite to many different scenarios, is let somebody else go in and hash it up, and then you go do the job that should be done afterwards. Right? Is and then revel in that glory that comes after the fact. Is you don't have to be bullish. You just have to deliver. And you deliver by being curious. You deliver by not being certain. You deliver by having empathy. You deliver by having the courage and the vulnerability to be able to do what is necessary. And sometimes what is necessary is to say, I don't know whether I can do that, but I do know that I can probably figure it out, or I give it my best shot. Instead of this feeling of I need to know, is I honestly believe that the next 50 years of our corporate existence, that women will run the world. Like I'm and I don't just believe that, I'm banking on it in the fact that I got 4 daughters, right? And there are so many examples of brilliant female leaders that I'm looking forward to the day that we just call them brilliant leaders.
Yeah. Wow, this is so powerful. What a good session this has been. Phil, one last question for you. What does the M stand for?
The M stands for Michael.
All
you
right.
Want to know why I need it?
Why?
And this is sometimes the simplest of little things that end up becoming part of your identity. Is when I first set up my personal brand business back in 2008, I couldn't acquire philjones.com. So I couldn't get the URL, but I could get philmjones.com, and that's where it came from. And then later onwards from there, Manchester United signed a soccer player by the same name as me. I'm never going to win Phil Jones Google rankings. And worst things always, if you want to understand how sometimes you're going uphill, is I'm a professional speaker. You put Phil Jones speaker into Google, I'm fighting with a bass amplifier company that make musical equipment called Phil Jones speakers. Like, I mean, like you're wondering sometimes how chips are stacked against you. Like, we don't all have it easy all the time.
That's amazing.
And that's where the M comes into my brand, but it's nothing more than my middle name of Michael.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, Phil, thank you so much for this amazing, amazing conversation. I so deeply appreciate your time. I think this has been so insightful, and I cannot wait to hear everything that comes out. This is just going to be so powerful, just for me, for myself, and for everybody who listens to this. So thank you for joining us.
A huge privilege. Thank you for inviting me to be part of the journey.
All right, that is it for this episode. And if you're ready to take things to the next level, I invite you to check out our free salary coaching inner circle Facebook group on, well, of course, Facebook. You just go ahead and search for Salary Coaching Inner Circle on your Facebook search bar, and it will surely show up. You'll get live access to me, the opportunity to engage with our super powerful guest speakers, and you'll get the support of hundreds of career-oriented, like-minded women just like you. So check it out, and also be sure to catch out next episode with more ways to help you know your worth, get your worth, and live out the career